If you've ever been told that your hormones are normal, but you feel off, your energy's low, you have food cravings, your mood is unstable, you have inflammation, this episode is for you. Because a lot of women don't have hormone problems on paper. What they actually have is an unstable metabolism. And their hormones are fluctuating, often so quickly, that these minor shifts and changes that are enough to cause symptoms are hard to capture on paper, leaving many women frustrated. We're told that our hormones fluctuate normally, and that is true. We have very cyclical responses within our bodies that are controlled by our hormones. So our hormones go up and down and will vary depending on where we are in our menstrual cycle, depending on our life cycles, and other factors. Stress also influences these fluctuations within the fluctuations. So although while we're menstruating and we're in that phase of life, we'll have hormone fluctuations. Within those normal sorts of fluctuations, there can be changes that lead to actual symptoms. And this is what can be very difficult to capture with blood work. Again, leaving many women very frustrated because they never seem to get answers for why they're so tired, why they're gaining weight, why they're having difficulty losing weight, why they have uncontrollable food cravings and inflammation that just won't come off. When stress impacts your hormones above and beyond what is considered to be normal, this destabilizes women's metabolism. And it's this unstable metabolism that is leading to the symptoms. And this matters a lot because hormones are extremely important in terms of body function. And although when we check blood work, what we're seeing is what's floating around in the bloodstream, that's not nearly the entire story about hormones. Hormones respond to the environment within your body, inside your cells, not just in the bloodstream itself. So when the metabolic environment inside of cells becomes unstable due to a multitude of factors, whether it be stress, whether it be toxic burden, being exposed to potentially heavy metals or other toxins, microplastics and such, can lead to metabolic instability in the body. Hormones are extremely sensitive to the cellular environment. So when the metabolic environment within the cells becomes unstable, hormones will fluctuate even more, becoming imbalanced in many cases. Hormone regulation becomes a lot harder under those circumstances. And these fluctuations feel a lot more intense. Welcome to Women's Metabolism MD Podcast. I'm Dr. Riobé, OB-GYN and Integrative physician. This is where we simplify women's metabolism so you can stop guessing and start getting results that actually last. Today, we're talking about hormones and your metabolism. And this is really important to understand from the beginning, and that is hormones and metabolism are inseparable. Your hormones are like blueprints or instruction manuals. They drive metabolism, and they also respond to metabolism. So they drive different types of what we call feedback loop within the body. They're drivers in one aspect, and they're also like levers, feeding information into the body to tell it what to do next. So they're responding to what they see in your metabolism, and then they're also driving how the metabolism will respond to what they see. So they're controlling your metabolism on multiple levels. They influence your appetite, they influence your cravings, they influence your moods, your energy levels, fat storage, inflammatory responses, and they influence sleep, among other things. Hormones are also, like I said before, feedback loops. So they're your body's way of communicating with itself in many ways. So it helps make sense of what the body is up to, how it's adapting, And it's also formulating the next move and how your body will respond. So when women say my hormones are off, what they're often describing is an unstable metabolism. What they're saying is my system feels unstable, my system feels unpredictable. My appetite is either too low or too high. My sleep is inconsistent. I have trouble falling asleep. I wake up frequently. My mood is all over the place. People feel that their mood is just unstable. They might feel more irritable when they're more tired, for example, when they don't get enough sleep. They might feel more irritable the week before their menstrual cycle. Or there may be no rhyme or reason to their irritability. It just may be something that feels consistently out of balance for them. A lot of women feel anxiety when their metabolism is unstable, and energy fluctuations, whether they feel more tired as they move through the day, or whether they feel more tired if they sit still. I have some people who can't nap. They feel horrible when they nap, even though they're exhausted. And then I have others who say they feel great if they just take a short nap. That has to do with the instability in their metabolism, or how their metabolism is out of balance. There are patterns to metabolism in how it becomes out of balance based on what it's responding to. And again, this becomes very frustrating because when you come to see us as physicians and we do blood work, very often that blood work looks just fine, leaving you extremely frustrated. Now, don't get me wrong, blood work is important. Sometimes excluding things is just as important as finding things. So making sure that you don't have any type of major hormonal conditions or autoimmune conditions, major infections and things like that are really important to rule out with blood work. But very often those things are ruled out, and yet we still don't have answers. And as a physician, I believe in data. I believe in testing. It's extremely important. But unfortunately, it doesn't always answer the questions that we're looking for. But here's what we often miss about blood work. It's just a snapshot in time. And because women's hormones are so complex and do fluctuate so much just on a normal basis, it is very difficult to capture these things with blood work unless they are extreme and consistent. Although you may have significant symptoms, your blood work may just not give up the answers. And that's not because it's wrong. It's simply because these changes are not really visible in blood work because they're occurring deep inside your cells, where blood work just doesn't really access. So we don't really get answers about what's going on in the body's cells when we do blood work. And of course, as younger women, estrogen and progesterone levels will naturally fluctuate in your bloodstream, making it even more challenging to know what's going on. So one blood draw, even two blood draws sometimes, doesn't really capture the whole story. And as women move into menopause, when that fluctuation starts to settle, even then we don't really get clear answers with blood work in terms of what's going on with these hormonal fluctuations that are resulting from unstable metabolism. The hormonal fluctuations that occur from instability within someone's metabolism is different than the normal cycling that we would anticipate with the menstrual cycle. We would think that once all that cycling is over and a woman goes into menopause, we'd get better answers. Unfortunately, even then, sometimes it is really tricky to capture these fluctuations because, again, they're not really happening in the bloodstream. They're happening deep inside the cells on a metabolic level. So even in menopause, although we would hope that things would get very simplified, things can sometimes get even more hectic, especially if stress is playing a big role. Insulin levels also fluctuate. Cortisol levels also fluctuate. Even though the ovaries are not cycling as much as they did before, and they're more or less in retirement, so to speak, there are still other hormones that are influencing metabolism that are still highly in flux depending on your diet, what you're eating, how much sleep you're getting, and many other factors, what kind of exercise you're getting. All of these influence insulin and cortisol levels as well. And these in turn can influence estrogen and progesterone levels, as well as testosterone levels in women. So yes, you can have normal hormone labs and still have symptoms related to hormonal fluctuation. It's all about the metabolic environment that those hormones are responding to. And this is where I'd like to introduce a different way of thinking to help you figure out what's going on causing your symptoms. Instead of asking what's going on with my hormones or what's wrong with my hormones, a helpful question to ask is, what is my metabolism adapting to that is forcing my hormones to fluctuate or compensate in some way? Because hormones do help us to compensate and adapt. They compensate to keep us functioning. They compensate to keep you stable metabolically. Sometimes that compensation is what is creating the symptoms that you're experiencing. Because sometimes hormones are compensating out of necessity. Some symptoms that women will experience when they are describing how their hormones feel off is energy levels that don't match how much rest you get. While they might be getting plenty of sleep, they may not be getting restful sleep. They wake up extremely tired. They have very low exercise tolerance and stress tolerance as a result. Other people may be more fatigued due to inflammation and toxin buildup. They have a different metabolic pattern. They'll respond better if they move around more. Someone with a depleted metabolic pattern will respond better to naps and rest. When you're resting and you just don't feel rested, some women recognize these as feeling like their hormones are off because it just doesn't make sense to them that they don't feel rested when they got sleep. And they're not wrong. Cravings that feel loud and annoying, especially at night. Inflammation in the midsection, puffiness, fluid retention. Sleep. We touched on this a little bit, but sleep that's light, people that wake up frequently or easily or have trouble falling asleep. All of these things have a lot to do with hormonal fluctuation. Even though the hormone levels may look normal, that doesn't mean it's not a hormone-related symptom, because the body actually responds to metabolic patterns. And those hormonal fluctuations are happening in response to those patterns. If you watched our last episode, we talked about stress and metabolism and the impacts of cortisol on women's metabolism. So if you haven't watched that one, I highly recommend it, because cortisol is a huge driver of hormone symptoms and metabolic instability. Today, I want to expand on that lens and talk about other hormones that can be causing or involved in metabolic instability. Because even if stress is not the main driver, there are other hormones that are at play that could be driving instability in the body, causing these symptoms. Blood sugar signaling, insulin as an example, thyroid hormones, and estrogen and progesterone rhythms and cycling. So let's start with blood sugar. I often see fairly young women coming into my office with abnormal blood sugar levels, and they're confused because often they're eating quite well and quite healthy. Blood sugar crashes are also an issue, and those can look like unstable energy, feeling shaky or anxious if you miss meals, feeling very irritable if you miss meals, potentially needing to have caffeine to function and focus, and again, those late night cravings and snacking, having an inconsistent appetite, either being ravenously hungry or not hungry at all. And here's what's important to know, and that is blood sugar patterns influence hormonal patterns. When your blood sugar drops too low, your body can sense that as a threat, and that can result in cortisol being increased so that your blood sugar can come up as a response. And you get these sugar highs and lows. And that can wreak havoc with your energy. You can have energy crashes, You can feel anxious, fluctuate back and forth in a way that feels very inconsistent. When the blood sugar starts to normalize again, or it starts to drop a little bit more again, then you get cravings. And again, this is where this inconsistency comes in. So sometimes when a woman says my hormones are off, what she means is that her blood sugar regulation is off, and the hormones that regulate that are off. And this is where sometimes the metabolism is so unstable that the body is sending signals that are difficult to interpret. Some women might think that's a signal to eat less, and they might start restricting their food intake and their calories. And that might cause the body to feel even more threatened, especially if it's in a depleted metabolic pattern. The reason your body would feel threatened by this is because the human brain has a really hard time distinguishing fact from fiction sometimes. And this is why when we go see a movie, we can trick the brain into thinking that what's on the movie screen is actually happening in real life. It's actually hard for the brain to interpret reality from fiction. There may not be an actual lion or bear threatening you, but because the chemical signals are the same inside the body interprets that as a threat. When cortisol is going up for any reason, because maybe you've had a sugar crash or you've reduced your calories, trying to lose weight, for example, and that's causing cortisol to go up, your body interprets that the same way it would an actual predator. Now, obviously, there is no predator in the room, so you're not going to go into a full-blown fight or flight response, but the high cortisol mimics one in many ways. And this is where stress can become chronic. Because if you add to that sleep deprivation, maybe you're not sleeping as well and you're waking up frequently, if you add to that over-exercising for your metabolic pattern, the body will keep thinking itself to be under threat. And this will allow the body to spiral down and to deplete itself even more over time, leading to more symptoms and more instability. And that's not because women are doing anything wrong. Women are trying to respond to the signals that their bodies are sending them. But when there's instability, those signals become very inconsistent, and it's really hard to know exactly how to respond. And so women start doing trial and error, trying to find the path, because again, their blood work's normal, they've been to the doctor, there's no major diagnosis, and so they're left on their own to try to figure out what's going on. When the body's metabolism is unstable, it goes into this adaptation mode, where it's trying to compensate and gain its footing. But if there's too much instability in the system, it can never really rebalance itself without help. It keeps compensating and adapting instead of just balancing itself back out. So this may look like even more fatigue, even more weight gain, even more inflammation over time. The second important system is thyroid. Thyroid makes critical hormones for us. It actually makes 4 different hormones. 2 of them we have no clue what they do, and the other 2 we have a pretty good idea of what they do. One is called T4. T4 is the stored form of thyroid hormone. When your thyroid hormone is in that form, it's not actually functioning as thyroid hormone yet. It has to be converted into something else called T3. T3 is the more active version of thyroid hormone. There's also TSH. TSH is thyroid stimulating hormone, and that's the brain signal that signals the thyroid to make more of its own hormones. So there's a feedback loop. Thyroid is critical because it runs metabolism. It produces energy. It influences your body temperature. It influences your immune system, digestion, fluid balance, your body composition, fat burning, calorie burning. When thyroid signaling is off or low, women may describe being fatigued. They may gain weight. They may have increased inflammation. They may catch colds more easily. And they may have sleep interruptions as well. Thyroid also can influence your mood and cholesterol metabolism. So sometimes, again, that blood work is normal, but it doesn't look really great. It might be that it's in the low normal range for your thyroid hormones. And that may be too low for some women, and they may still experience symptoms even though their blood work is actually normal. Thyroid being a little off can be a significant cause of what causes cholesterol to go up. I see increasingly more and more younger patients coming in with high cholesterol levels. And it really doesn't have to do with their diet directly. The third system is estrogen and progesterone production. Estrogen and progesterone are made in two different systems in the body: the ovaries in women of reproductive age, and also the adrenal system, or the stress handlers. The same system that makes your stress hormones also makes estrogen and progesterone. Both the ovaries and the adrenal system will influence estrogen and progesterone levels. Estrogen and progesterone influence breast health, brain health. Estrogen has about 400 different functions in the human body, so there's almost no system in your body that it doesn't influence. Premenstrual symptoms, postpartum symptoms like depression or even psychosis can sometimes have to do with abnormal hormone signaling. And it's not always about one singular hormone being too high or too low. It's also about hormonal regulation and what we call metabolization. Your body makes hormones, and then it has to break those hormones down, repackage them, so to speak, so that it can eliminate them from the body. We call that metabolization and elimination. Sometimes hormone symptoms are not necessarily because the levels are off, but also because the hormones are not being properly broken down and eliminated. And they could be recirculating in the body in less than normal form, or in a toxic form, so to speak, if your liver has not been able to properly break them down. This can sometimes be responsible for irritability, breast tenderness, weight gain as well. It's not a simple matter of the levels are too high or the levels are too low. It has a lot to do with regulating the removal from the body as well. Even vitamin and mineral deficiencies can influence estrogen levels. And so the gastrointestinal system can also influence your estrogen and progesterone levels or breakdown. Any number of these hormonal imbalances can destabilize metabolism, and an unstable metabolism can destabilize any number of those hormones. They feed off each other. It's a feedback loop. The goal isn't necessarily to chase after hormones that we can't even measure directly. The goal is to stabilize metabolism. When metabolism stabilizes, hormonal balance gets easier. And this is exactly why I developed the dynamic metabolic typing system, as well as the 4 pillars of wellness: eat, move, rest, and detox. When metabolism stabilizes, hormones don't have to work so hard. They don't have to compensate as much, and they have less to have to correct. So let's talk about this in practical terms. What does it mean to match your 4 pillars of wellness to your dynamic metabolic type or your metabolic pattern? It means we stop doing things randomly. It means we stop trial and error, and we do targeted support based on where your metabolism is. We meet it where it is, and we help support it. Whereas one pattern may need more stability and support, another pattern may need more clearing out of toxins and inflammation. One woman may need more intensity, more intense exercises, or intermittent fasting. One woman may benefit from raw vegan food, whereas someone else may benefit from well-cooked food that's a little bit on the spicy side. One woman may need more sleep than another. Women who have a depleted metabolic pattern or a depleted dynamic metabolic type need more sleep than a woman who has what we call an excess or overloaded dynamic metabolic type. An excess dynamic metabolic type tends to have more inflammation and toxins as their main pattern, as opposed to depletion in the case of a deficient dynamic metabolic type pattern. So matching that is extremely important. Timing of when you eat is extremely important, in addition to what you're eating, how often you're eating, whether or not you're fasting. Exercise, similarly, some people need more intense exercises. Some people need to be extremely restorative with their exercise. One person may benefit from high intensity interval training, especially if they have an excess dynamic metabolic type, whereas someone with a deficient dynamic metabolic type will benefit more from restorative exercise. Someone with a cold dynamic metabolic type will be the one that benefits from the warming foods, whereas someone with a hot dynamic metabolic type will benefit more from cooling foods. So this is how we match metabolism to the inputs of the 4 pillars. When you apply the 4 pillars correctly to the right dynamic metabolic type, metabolism stabilizes. Hormonal fluctuations become smoother and more normal. And metabolism improves from the inside out. When metabolism stabilizes, hormonal imbalances and inconsistencies begin to calm. Energy becomes more consistent. Food cravings begin to improve. Sleep becomes more consistent. Even mood can become more stable if the metabolic support is there. And your body stops feeling like it's fighting against you and starts working with you, because you're meeting it where it is. So if you feel like you've been doing everything right, but you're still feeling off, it's very likely that you've been trying strategies that just don't match your metabolic pattern or your dynamic metabolic type. Before I developed dynamic metabolic types, I studied 3 different systems of medicine. I'm a trained OB-GYN, and I also studied traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture for 5 years, as well as functional medicine or integrative medicine. Dynamic metabolic typing derives from traditional Chinese medicine patterns. Functional medicine adds more modern terms like stress physiology, inflammation, hormones. Dynamic metabolic typing is a way of modernizing very ancient patterns that we find in traditional Chinese medicine to make them more accessible and usable in today's terms. It helps to make it very practical and usable, to make the lifestyle changes and modifications to your nutrition that will meet your metabolism where it is. Dynamic metabolic typing is a way to determine your metabolic pattern based in traditional Chinese medicine theory, fusing with functional or integrative medicine. This is why I created the Dynamic Metabolic Type quiz. It's free and it just takes a few minutes. It helps you identify your metabolic pattern or your dynamic metabolic type. This helps free you from the one-size-fits-all methodology that often backfires for people. It also frees you from trial and error, because once you know your metabolic pattern, you'll know how to apply the 4 pillars of wellness to meet your metabolism where it's at, and to help balance it and bring stability to it. The link is in the description. In the next episode, we're going to talk about why food restriction or calorie restriction backfires for many women, and why the right strategy for you depends on your metabolic pattern. Thank you for listening to the Women's Metabolism MD podcast. If this episode helped you, or if you feel that it would be helpful for a woman that you love, please share this with her. I'll see you in the next episode.